Hopefully you're here for this particular topic, and if not, then now's time to run. Let me start my timer. Right, we have 30 minutes to go through this, and I'm going to cough. I'm really sorry. It's going to happen, so I will try to keep it to minimal, but, it's going to happen. See if we do it now. Right, let's start with the important thing. My name is Steve Poole. I work for Sonotype, who are the providers of Maven Central, and I'm going to talk you through what's going on, why we do it, and what's coming down the pipe as far as Maven Central is concerned. So it all starts with you, right? As a developer, and I'm assuming you're all Java developers here, because where we are, and it all starts with you, right? Because at some point you want some code, and you Google and you search wherever you go, you end up searching, and eventually you get one of these, which is some dependency coordinates, whether it's like that or whatever it is that you choose in terms of a build tool. You have some dependency information and you want to go get it. And of course the thing is that the reason that you want to do that is because almost all of the software that we produce is actually written by somebody else. Right? 90%-ish, depending on what you're doing, is code that somebody else wrote. And so you need to come and find it. Hence why we have things like Maven Central. And as you can see, the numbers at the bottom, there's a lot of Java code out there. Right? There's lots and lots of this stuff. And Maven Central is just there, isn't it? You pick one of these dependencies, you stick it in, you do Maven compile or something, and everything downloads, and you're done. You don't even think about it. Right? It's just there. So I'm going to try and give you the next half an hour some discussion. I'm going to tell you a tiny bit about Maven Central, and I'm going to talk a lot more about why we're evolving it. And I'm going to point out that you have some homework. So the doors are shut, so you can't leave now. And then any Q&A. And because this is short talk, if I don't answer your questions, just come and find me the rest of the day or tomorrow, and we can have these conversations. Right? So as I said, it's Maven Central, and pretty much people just rely on it being there and don't even think about it. It was started by two people quite some time ago, Brian Fox and Jason Van Vel. They created it because they created Maven, and Maven Central, the repo system, is just a natural part of that process. And they set it up and came out of the Apache project, and it was there, 2003, funded by the public, us. Right? By 2005, there'd been some rearranging of things because you have a website that's serving downloads starts to get a bit clunky, so they separate things out. Still being funded by the public. And then if you roll forward to now, well, hey, it's not funded by the public anymore. It's funded by us. The reason it's funded by us is quite straightforward. Maven became too big. Maven is the thing that we build on. Maven Central has been offline a couple of times since it started because of internet problems and DNS problems, but the service has literally been running since it was booted on a server under Brian Fox's desk. And they've moved it into the cloud and stuff like that, and they've provided that service. And as you can imagine, there's a lot going on. So under the covers, it's not enormously complicated. There's sort of three use cases, right? The people, you want to search for stuff, you want to pull stuff down, or of course you're a publisher. And basically 3 routes in, And obviously underneath the covers, there's a bunch of sonar type tech, but that's irrelevant. You push stuff in, and literally some Jenkins jobs that copy things from here to keep things going. So we have a repository system. we use Fastly in a big S3 bucket to store stuff, and then some indexing and stuff like that. Nothing particularly complicated other than the course that it has to scale and be there all the time. So that's part of the cost. And then, of course, it's just how often this thing is being used, because it is used all the time. Even if, and the likelihood is if you're an enterprise developer, that somewhere else there'll be another repository system that you're relying on locally, and that's still pulling from here, right? So the numbers are pretty big, not stupid numbers, but as you can imagine, the costs of running these systems became expensive. But that's okay. Sonotype's not saying, hey, thank you, you should give us thanks for this. And if you think about it, we've never really talked about what's going on. The reason that I'm here to talk about it is not to say, hey, aren't we great? We're doing this because we want to. But it's what we're going to do next that we need your input on. Right, so the other numbers is the number of downloads. Right, 496 billion. Right, that's a big number in anybody's dictionary, and that's what's coming down. So as I said, it is expensive to run. We're doing it because we have commercial interests, but we're also doing it because the people who created this, Brian Fox and others who have been around, want to do this, because Sonotype is actually quite an open source company. It's just been invisible for years, and we're trying to get people to realize that we're here. Right. So it's expensive to run, but guess what? There's more things that cost, because it's more than just it being a repo system. Okay? Because the other thing that Maven Central does is it helps keep your application safe because of what we do when things get uploaded. Right? So I'll talk about that in a sec. It's hard to keep software safe because of what's happening in terms of what's happening in the bad guy space, but we'll talk about that. And again, I'll talk about that in a second. Luckily, because we have domain protection, that means you can't publish something to Maven Central unless you can prove that you own the equivalent internet domain. Right? And that first protection separates Maven Central or Java from pretty much all the other repos. Right? Because now immediately you can be confident that the person who put com.foo something up there owns com.foo, the domain name. And for many other repositories, you have no idea who the publisher is. Right? So that's easy, and we enforce that, and there are some rules that you can go follow if you've not tried this before, so it's not hard to do this. But if we didn't do that, we'd be running into the same problems that we get in all the other domains, which is malware. So as an aside, if you look at some of the other places, one of the things that Sonotype is regularly doing is spotting malware being added by bots, not even by human beings, into other packages, right? So the domain name protection keeps that away, so we should be thankful for that as being an accident of Java's design, right? But the rest of it, the rest of how do we keep you safe, how do we make sure that the code that you download is as safe as we can make it, well, it gets really hard. Right? Because does the package contain vulnerabilities? Well, you probably don't even think about it. You probably go down and download it, and you may have an enterprise system that will or may not prevent you using it, but you tend to just download it. You find the coordinates, download, right? Right? And you haven't even considered how it is that you detect whether an open source project has vulnerabilities in, right? And if you do find something's got vulnerabilities in, Do you stop it being published? And the answer is we don't. If it's got vulnerabilities in, then that's the publisher's challenge. If you try to publish something that's got active malware in and we spot it, that will get killed, right? But we're putting all this effort to make sure that what gets published to Maven Central is as safe as we can make it, right? So Sonotype has a whole bunch of commercial tools, which I think, even as a developer advocate, I will tell you they're good stuff, and that stuff is applied to all the code that you're uploading, right? And only malware gets rejected. So often people say things like, well, you've heard about Log4j and it's got vulnerabilities. Why don't you take them down? And the simple answer is that it may be a vulnerability to you, but some other developer may be pulling it down to patch it, so they don't experience the vulnerability. So if we were to remove code with vulnerabilities in, apart from we'd be taking loads down, it could break people's systems because we don't know what their use cases are. But if we figure out it's got malware in, then it will get cut. Okay. Yeah. So with Maven Central, the data that we collect, the analytics are made available to you, right? So you can go to Maven Central and you can look at a dependency that you've selected and you can see the vulnerability state, which is good. That gives you information about whether it's going to be the right choice. There might be other versions that have more or less vulnerabilities, and you might choose those instead. You have the information available to you to make that choice. Okay. In general, though, putting aside Maven Central, the challenge for us is that the ability for you to work out whether you have a vulnerability is based on two things. It's based on the scanning tools that you buy or you use, and it's based on the data. And the data comes from researchers. Right? If you don't buy the good stuff, if you don't make sure that you're getting the right data, if you don't make sure the scanning tools are good enough, then it's easy for things to slip through. Right? It's also a factor of how good the bad guys are. And as I'm going to show you in a minute, the world is changing. Right? So even though we're getting better, always getting better at figuring out where vulnerable code could be, can we find it? You think about Log4j, right? Log4j is a really good example. You might have it as a dependency that you've declared, or it might be a dependency of a dependency of a dependency. And it may be very simple to see because you can follow through the pops. But maybe somebody has created a fat jar, or is using shadowing, or is doing some bytecode manipulation to change the package names because they want to. Sometimes you find that you've got something like Log4j in your application, even though you can't see where in the dependency tree came from, because somebody did something different. So scanning tools are all about, can we find those circumstances and can we catch them? And unfortunately, the bad guys are getting much better at figuring out to hide it. Whereas developers, we're not so good at catching up. So I said about Log4j, Maven Central. We know what gets downloaded. We know what the world is downloading. Here is some data that you can go to Sonotype website and see for yourself. 9th of December, Log4j came out. Very quickly, most people patched everything. But even sort of now, these numbers are slightly old, but even so, it's pretty relevant. 33% of the things that you download from Maven Central, the Log4j that you download from Maven Central, is a vulnerable version. And you talk to developers, they go, no, it can't be us. We've done everything. Well, sorry. In theory, 1/3 of you here are working in some way in an organization, whatever, that thinks it may have solved the problem, but in fact it hasn't. Right? So we've not evolved. Bad guys have. So Sonotype produces this thing called the Software Supply Chain Report, and it's based on a lot of data we get from Maven Central and other places. And it's just what's happening. Lots of companies produce reports in their business area. One of the scariest thing is that number there. So for the last 2 years, the amount of attacks that we would classify as supply chain attacks, i.e. getting into basically your build processes or getting into open source projects to contaminate your dependencies you're going to use, has skyrocketed, right? It's just gone through the roof. And there's no sign of it not stopping, right? And the reason for that is because what used to be simple cybercrime is now cyber warfare. So again, it used to be cybercrime, and the motivations were primarily money, and then new motivations now are cyber warfare. So that means, can I get into the supply chain of your country? Can I get into your power systems? Can I get into your train systems? Can I get into the traffic light systems? Can I get into the companies that do transport? You name it. Anything that affects human economy is a target. Right. The original aim was to get into these things and then, when necessary, do something bad. So you think about how you got here. Software is involved in you getting in this room. Absolutely, right? I mean, we're presenting software, but however you got here, somewhere, software was involved. And if that software had been corrupted or turned off, right, you could not get here. And it can be really simple things. It can be just scrambling addresses in a database so that things don't get delivered, or more sophisticated switching addresses. The idea is to cause chaos at the right time. And unfortunately, what we've discovered is that this isn't something that's been stored up for situations when there's a real war. No, what people are beginning to understand is that nation states have identified that they can affect your economy, right? Now, why not? Let's have a go. You've seen, I'm sure you've read about some of these things. You would have seen all the discussions about influencing elections and things like this. This is much more direct. This is, can I get into your systems and affect your economy? Software supply chains and how we deal with them are going to be a big thing this year. So look out for that. But you get the point, right? It's a new style of behavior, motivation. Right. And they're after all sorts of places. So completely separate talk. And I've got a talk this afternoon, and I'll touch more on a bunch of this stuff, right? Because we don't really have time to go into this. But what's this got to do with Maven Central? Well, we want to give you more insight. It's in everybody's interests that we understand more about the software that you consume and give you the data that you need to make better choices. Right? That's simply what it's about. Right? So you're going to see more stuff happening. Has anybody heard of the acronym SBOM? S-B-O-M? Yes, good. Last year, I would have not got any hands up. This year, good, and you're all going to get used to it because it's a new thing. Right? It's the bill of materials. It's the thing that tells you what's in your software dependency tree. It doesn't rely on scanning tools to figure it out for you. The idea is just like a recipe on the side of something you bought in the supermarket. It's very clear and specific and accurate. So that's coming. There are things like SIG stores. So when you have these bill of materials, you have to sign them to keep them to prove that they're valid. Where do you put the signatures and those sort of stuff? So you'll hear SIG store. Maven Central is getting a SIG store so that when you start publishing things to Maven Central, you'll also be able to publish a SBOM and a signature. Right? More than that, we're looking at all the ways that the industry is figuring out how you assess the quality and the safety of the software. So the Linux Foundation, the OpenSSF group, there's a lot of people, all looking to figure out what makes good software. And this isn't a functional thing. This is how easy is it to compromise that open source project? Because if the bad guys can compromise that open source project that you pulled in, then they win. Right? And they're trying to do that, and they're very sophisticated. So we're looking at how do you assess that any open source project is doing the right thing? Does it talk about how it deals with vulnerabilities? Does it have a reporting process? How does it do releases? There's a whole bunch of stuff, okay? And I'm going to show you a couple, but we're early days. So everybody is trying to figure out what makes the right answer, because at some point it has to be quantified, qualified, so that we don't go, oh, I think it's a good project. We want to be able to give you some way of assessing it so you can make the right choices, right? So this is enhanced developer intelligence. So we're not enhancing your intelligence, right? We're not making you smarter. We're giving you more data so you can make smarter choices, right? So which one have I got here? Yeah, so you can go get this of Maven Central now, and you can see things. We're looking at different tools. This one on the left is a thing called the CLO monitor. It's from CNCF. It works out whether an open source project has the basics. Does it have a security MD file? Does it have some of the security posture? That goes in. We associate that with the open source project for the dependency that you use. We give you the data so that you can see from Maven Central whether or not this is something you want to consume. And the bottom one is one that we've just brought out. There's this thing called Bomb Doctor. So now you can go to Maven Central and get an SBOM for the dependencies that you're choosing. You can now create your own SBOM. So if you go to Bomb Doctor, you can go create your own SBOM and see what is there. You can upload that SBOM or somebody else's SBOM, or use some of the example ones, and we'll give you, I have to go back slightly, you can't really see it, but what you get is you get a graphical view of the dependencies that you've selected, including all the details about how vulnerable they are. And we're just going to keep adding to that, right? We're just going to keep adding more and more data about behavior. We're looking at wisdom of the crowd. What choices do most people make when they're upgrading? Do they go from this version to this version? Wouldn't it be good to know that the version that you've just chosen has binary breaking API changes? Well, we can work that out, so we can tell you. That'd be good. So all that information to help you stay safe is being merged. We have a whole bunch of rules that we're gathering. And of course, the whole point is not just our rules, it's the industry rules, and we want your rules. We want you to tell us. We want you to share what you think makes good software. Because the clearer we are about what makes a good open source project, the easier it will be for us to quantify that, put it into Maven Central, and make it available to you so that when you choose software, you choose it more wisely. Because we have lots of rules, but we would like your input, okay? I also have one other thing to ask you. Look, you see my T-shirt? Okay, this one here, right? Maven Central doesn't have a logo. And we would really, really like to create a logo for Maven Central. So we will be soon doing it more formally. But if you have an idea for a logo, not including the ones that we're coming up with, right? You don't have to, all I really want you to do is either tweet me a picture or just an idea, and we will put this together. We'll get our designers to put up some of these things, and eventually we'll have some competition and ask people to vote, right? But good old Maven Central doesn't have a logo, and it's been around forever, and we need to fix that, right? I mean, there's the owl, okay, but the owl is, well, I'm not sure I like it. But anyway, we're thinking that. Oh, by the way, I have to ask you, you see the boat, you see this one. How many people here would have this as a tattoo? How about a temporary tattoo? Anybody have a temporary tattoo? Really? Oh. Yeah, definitely a T-shirt. So I asked this in DevOps Belgium, and lots of people go, yeah, I'll have a temporary tattoo. You know, okay. You guys are just boring. Yeah. Okay, right. What can I say? So go play with the bomb doctor, because I think what you'll get insight anyway, probably more than you were expecting, because it turns out that not many people have access to tools that give them both a graphical view of their dependencies and also the vulnerability data. So that might be interesting you too. It will also give you an introduction to SBOMs, and these are the new things coming, right? Maven Central is going to get these things because it needs to have these capabilities, and they're worth. It's just like you need to start having that in your head. SBOMs, SIG stores. You know, these are all the keywords that you're going to hear, and they're things that you have to become familiar with. And that's sort of it. I'm sorry it's a bit of a whirlwind. I didn't cough, which is good. Are there any questions? Yes?
So I saw you are displaying the vulnerabilities now on Maven Central.
Yeah.
On the webpage. Have you thought of adding warnings to the Maven dependency plugin or similar creative plugins so developers see those warnings while you're downloading the article?
What you're really asking is, why doesn't Maven, the tool, automatically give you warnings for dependencies, like NPM does? Yeah. I have to say, that's not my space. That we have people in that. I have asked that, and I'm not sure I've got a good answer yet. It's definitely not impossible. You can run it now with just putting in the right plugin coordinates. But really, it's like, yeah, the question is, why do we don't get these build tools to tell you these things up front? And the answer is, I don't know. And I don't even know whether that's on the plan, Sorry, can't answer the question, don't know, yeah. Any more? No. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. Again, I said I'm here, all week. I'm here today and tomorrow. If any more questions come to mind or things weren't clear, there's guests.
Yeah, will there be a Maven plugin for the bomb doctor?
Well, it's not really there's, I don't know if you can see this. There's some instructions on how to use the Cyclone DX plugin to give you an SBOM. Yeah. I think probably that question connected to the other one about will Maven tool get these things added. I think the chances are that the main Maven guys look at it as plugin things rather than a requirement, so yeah. But anyway, that one uses Cyclone DX, which is an XML form. There are other formats, but we're using Cyclone DX at the moment because it's the most well-formed solution at the moment. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. And as I said, I'm around until Thursday afternoon. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.